It was the kind of winter morning where the air bit at your skin the moment you stepped outside. Inside the diner, though, it was warm enough for the windows to fog and the smell of bacon and fresh coffee to wrap around you like a blanket. Ethan sat in their usual booth near the window, his daughter Emma across from him, swinging her legs under the table while drawing in her notebook. This was their Saturday ritual, a pocket of calm in a life that had been anything but calm for the past few years. He was halfway through his coffee when the front door creaked open and a cold gust rushed in. A woman stepped inside, shoulders hunched, wearing a coat so thin it looked like it belonged to a different season. She kept her head down, moving toward a booth in the corner with a paper cup of coffee in hand. It should have been nothing, just another customer trying to get warm. But then Ethan noticed the way the owner's eyes followed her. A moment later, the owner's voice cut across the room, sharp and loud enough to turn heads. "Ma'am, you can't sit here unless you're ordering a meal," he said, crossing his arms. The woman's voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the clatter of dishes. I did buy this coffee. I just needed a place to sit for a while." The owner frowned, his tone turning colder. "We've had people like you before, and it never ends well. You're making paying customers uncomfortable." Ethan's stomach tightened. People like you. He'd heard those words before, aimed at someone who didn't deserve them. The woman's cheeks flushed, and she reached for her bag like she might just leave without a word. That's when the owner stepped closer, blocking her path. "If you're not going to order, you need to go. Now." Emma looked up from her drawing, her brow furrowed. "Dad," she whispered, "why is he talking to her like that?" Ethan's chair scraped the floor as he stood. He didn't plan what to say, didn't even think it through. But his voice came out steady and clear. "She's with me." The whole diner seemed to pause. The woman turned, startled. Ethan stepped forward, putting himself between her and the owner. "And she's staying right here." The owner's eyes narrowed, like he was trying to decide if he wanted to argue. But Ethan didn't flinch, and maybe it was the way he stood, calm but unmovable, that finally made the man back off with a muttered, "Fine, just make sure she orders something." Ethan nodded once, then turned to the woman. "Come on," he said gently, gesturing toward his booth. She hesitated, clutching her coffee as if it were her last defense against the cold. Emma scooted over without being asked, making space beside her. "You can sit here," Emma said with a small smile. The woman gave a faint nod and slid into the booth. Up close, Ethan could see the wear in her coat, the redness in her hands, the way her shoulders stayed tense even in the warm air. "I'm Ethan," he said, offering his hand across the table. "This is my daughter, Emma." "Mia," she replied quietly, her fingers cold against his. "Thank you for what you did." Ethan shook his head. No one should be spoken to like that, especially not in front of a crowd. She didn't say anything right away, but her eyes softened. Emma pushed her plate of pancakes a little closer to Mia. "You can have some if you want. They're really good here." That earned the smallest smile, and for a moment some of the exhaustion in Mia's face seemed to lift. They didn't talk much after that. Ethan didn't press her for answers, and Mia didn't offer them. But he noticed the way her gaze lingered on the steam rising from her coffee, like she was trying to memorize the warmth before stepping back outside. When she finally stood, she pulled her coat tighter and looked at him. "I should go," she said softly. "You've already done enough." "It's not about enough," Ethan said, but she was already heading for the door. A blast of cold air swept in as she stepped outside, disappearing into the grey morning. Emma watched her go, then looked at her dad. "We'll see her again, right?" Ethan didn't answer right away, but something in his chest told him he hoped they would. 3 days passed before Ethan saw her again. It was another slow morning at the diner, the kind where Emma's crayons rolled lazily across the table and the smell of fresh biscuits filled the air. The bell over the door jingled, and when Ethan glanced up, there she was, Mia, looking a little less hurried but still carrying the same worn coat. She walked straight to their booth, her fingers wrapped around a small folded envelope. "I came to pay you back," she said, placing it on the table before Ethan could say a word. He opened his mouth to protest, but the look in her eyes told him not to. This wasn't just about the money, it was about pride. "You didn't have to," he said. "I know," she replied, her voice steady, "but I wanted to." Emma grinned, nudging over the empty spot beside her. "You can sit again if you want." Mia hesitated for a heartbeat, then slid into the booth. Her cheeks had a faint pink from the cold, and for the first time she seemed a little more at ease. Ethan waved over the waitress. "Coffee?" Mia nodded. "And maybe one of those blueberry muffins. I haven't had one in years." Emma's face lit up. "Best muffins in town, Dad says so." They ate slowly, the conversation coming in small pieces. Mia told them she used to work at a local print shop before it closed, that she'd been doing odd jobs since then but nothing steady. She didn't go into details, but Ethan noticed how she always kept her answers short when it came to where she stayed or who she knew in town. Before she left, Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out a small knitted scarf, uneven stitches, bright yellow yarn. "I made this," Emma said, handing it over. "It's not perfect, but it's warm." For a moment, Mia just stared at it, her lips parting like she didn't know what to say. Then she smiled, a real smile this time, and carefully looped it around her neck. "It's perfect," she whispered. As she stepped outside into the cold, Ethan watched her go again, but this time she didn't look quite as alone. It became a quiet rhythm after that. Every few mornings, Mia would appear at the diner, sometimes with a faint smile for Emma, sometimes with eyes that looked like they hadn't seen sleep in days. She never stayed too long, but each time she left, Ethan found himself wondering when she might walk through the door again. One Saturday, the weather had turned bitter, the kind where the wind rattled the glass and frost crept up the corners of the windows. Mia slid into their booth with her coffee, wearing the yellow scarf Emma had made. "That scarf's holding up," Ethan said with a small grin. She smiled back, tugging at one end of it. "It's the warmest thing I own." They sat for a while in comfortable silence before Mia spoke again, her voice low, almost like she was telling the story to herself. "3 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I worked at a print shop downtown for 8 years. It wasn't fancy, but it was steady. Then one morning the owner came in and said we were closing. Just like that." She stared down at her cup. "I had some savings, but rent in this town, well, it doesn't take long before the math stops working. I bounced between couches for a bit, but people have their own lives, you know. You start feeling like a burden." Ethan listened, not interrupting, just letting her words fill the space between them. "Now I pick up whatever work I can. Cleaning offices, handing out flyers, sometimes walking dogs for a few bucks. Most days I'm just trying to make it to the next one." She gave a short, self-conscious laugh. "Sorry, that's probably not breakfast conversation." "It's honest," Ethan said, "and I'd rather hear honest than polite silence." Emma reached across the table and slid her colouring book toward Mia. "Want to help me finish this page?" For the first time since she'd sat down, Mia's shoulders eased. She picked up a crayon and the two of them bent over the paper together, heads almost touching. Ethan watched them, realising he couldn't remember the last time he'd seen Emma connect with someone so quickly. And somewhere deep down, he knew this wasn't just about offering Mia a warm place to sit anymore. It was about keeping her in their lives. That evening, after dropping Mia off near the women's shelter, Ethan's phone buzzed. Clara's name lit up the screen. He answered with a smile in his voice. "Hey, how's my favourite sister?" "I'm your only sister," Clara replied, but there was a hint of warmth before her tone shifted. "Ethan, Emma's been talking about a woman named Mia. Who is she?" Ethan leaned against the porch railing, watching his breath curl in the cold night air. "She's someone we met at the diner. She's been having a rough time." "I figured as much," Clara said. "You've always had a big heart, but I'm worried. You don't really know her, And you've got Emma to think about. He rubbed the back of his neck, the boards creaking under his weight. I know, but she's kind, Clara. She's not what you think. And Emma likes her. Clara paused, her voice softening. And what about you? Do you like her? Ethan hesitated, thinking about the way Mia's face lit up when Emma gave her that yellow scarf. I like who she is with Emma, he said finally. That's enough for now. All right, Clara said, though her voice carried a note of caution. I'll be in town next weekend. Maybe I'll stop by the diner with you and Emma. I just want to see for myself. When the call ended, Ethan stayed on the porch for a moment, the cold biting at his hands. He thought about Clara's words, about how easily she could read him. Inside, Emma's laughter carried from the living room. And yet, even with the warning echoing in his mind, he knew he'd still be at that booth with Mia tomorrow morning. The following weekend, the diner was busier than usual. The smell of fresh cinnamon rolls drifted through the air, and the low hum of conversation filled every corner. Ethan and Emma had just slid into their booth when Mia walked in, shaking the cold from her coat. She spotted them right away, and for a moment that guarded look she often carried was replaced by something lighter. She came over, settling into the seat beside Emma, who immediately launched into showing her the latest drawing she'd been working on. It should have been just another easy morning, but halfway through their coffee, a man at the counter turned toward their booth. He was a regular Ethan recognised, loud voice, quick to complain. Isn't that the lady who was causing trouble here last month? He said, not even bothering to lower his voice. Guess some folks just can't take a hint. Mia froze, her fingers curling around her coffee cup. The words hung in the air, sharp enough to cut through the chatter. Ethan started to stand, but before he could, Mia spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. I'm just here to have breakfast with friends, she said, meeting the man's eyes for a brief second before looking away. The man muttered something under his breath and turned back to his plate. It wasn't much, but Ethan caught the faint tremor in Mia's hands slowly ease. He sat back down, studying her. You handled that well, he said quietly. Didn't feel like it, she replied, but there was a hint of pride in her voice. Emma leaned in, resting her head against Mia's arm. You didn't let him be mean to you, she said, matter of fact. And that, more than anything, seemed to make Mia's smile return. As they finished their meal, Ethan realised it wasn't just about protecting her anymore. She was starting to stand her ground, and he was proud to see it. Over the next few weeks, the changes in Mia were small but noticeable. She started showing up to the diner in a warmer coat, still second-hand, but clean and sturdy. Her cheeks had more colour, and the guarded way she once scanned the room when she walked in had softened. One morning, she slid into the booth with a quiet smile and set a folded flyer on the table. I got a job, she said, almost as if she wasn't sure she believed it herself. Ethan picked up the paper. A part-time position at a little bookstore on the edge of town. That's great, Mia, he said, his smile genuine. Emma clapped her hands, nearly knocking over her juice. Does that mean you can buy more muffins now? Mia laughed, and the sound was different, lighter, unforced. Maybe. But first, I'm going to get a pair of gloves that don't have holes in them. She told them about the bookstore, how it smelled like old paper and coffee, how the owner had a habit of slipping her free paperbacks at the end of the day. It was the first time Ethan had heard her talk about something with that kind of fondness. Halfway through breakfast, the bell over the diner door jingled and Clara walked in. She spotted them instantly and came over with a curious smile. Mind if I join you? She asked, sliding into the seat across from Mia before anyone could answer. Ethan caught the quick exchange of glances between the two women. Clara's tone was friendly, but there was a subtle measure in her eyes, as if she was silently comparing the person she saw now to the caution she'd voiced weeks ago. Mia, to her credit, met Clara's gaze and asked about her coffee order, even offering her half a muffin. The conversation stayed light. Emma's school project, the winter fair coming up, But Ethan noticed Clara listening more than she spoke. When breakfast ended, Clara gave Ethan a small nod, the kind that didn't say everything but told him enough. Later that day, as they walked out into the crisp air, Mia glanced at him. "That was your sister, wasn't it?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, she just wanted to see for herself." Mia tugged the yellow scarf a little tighter, and for once, didn't look away. It was a Thursday evening when Mia mentioned it, almost in passing, like she wasn't sure it mattered. They were at Ethan's kitchen table, Emma sprawled on the floor nearby, colouring with the new set of pencils Mia had given her for Christmas. "The bookstore owner. He said there might be a full-time position coming up," Mia said, tracing the rim of her mug with her finger. "But it's at the new branch they're opening 2 towns over." Ethan set down the dish towel he was holding. 2 towns over?" "About an hour and a half away," she replied. She kept her eyes on the steam rising from her tea. "It would mean more money, a steady paycheck. I could get a small apartment, maybe finally." She trailed off, then gave a small shrug. "It's the kind of thing I should want, right?" Ethan didn't answer right away. His mind flicked back to Clara's visit at the diner a few days earlier. The way his sister had been polite but watchful. The way she'd given him that small, almost approving nod when they parted. Clara had always been protective of him and Emma, and her unspoken message that morning had been clear enough. "She's not who you feared she might be." That approval should have made this easier, but now, with Mia talking about leaving, it only made the knot in his chest tighten. "It's a good opportunity," he said finally, keeping his voice even. "But it's also your choice. What do you want?" Mia gave a soft laugh, the kind that wasn't really about anything funny. "That's the thing. I don't know anymore. A few months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now, it's not so simple." Emma looked up from her drawing. "If you move, will you still come to the fair with us next year?" The question hung in the air, heavier than it sounded. Mia smiled faintly at her. "We'll see, kiddo." But when she glanced back at Ethan, there was something in her eyes, part fear, part hope, that told him the decision wasn't just about a job. It was about where she felt she belonged. The town's winter banquet was one of those events where everyone knew everyone, and news, good or bad, travelled faster than the coffee refills. Ethan hadn't planned on going, but Emma had begged, saying Mia had never been before. So they went, the 3 of them, walking into the community hall lit with strings of warm lights and smelling faintly of baked ham and cinnamon pie. At first it was easy. They found a table near the back, chatted with a few neighbours, and laughed over the raffle prizes. But while Mia was waiting in line for dessert, a man stepped too close and bumped her shoulder hard enough to make her spill cocoa down her sleeve. "Watch where you're going," he muttered, his tone sharp and dismissive. Mia took a small step back, clearly ready to apologise even though she hadn't done anything wrong. Ethan was already moving toward them. He reached her side in 2 long strides, his voice calm but carrying enough weight to cut through the noise. "You might want to think twice before speaking to my wife like that." The words hung in the air. The man blinked, caught off guard. "Your wife?" Ethan kept his gaze steady. "Yes, and you just spilled cocoa on her." Around them, the conversations at nearby tables had quieted. The man's posture shifted, his bravado shrinking as he mumbled an apology and stepped away. Mia stood still, her eyes wide, not in fear but in something closer to surprise. She looked up at Ethan, and for a moment it was just the 2 of them in that crowded room. "Wife, huh?" she said softly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Ethan's voice lowered, meant only for her. "If it keeps people from treating you like you don't matter, I'll say it as many times as I need to." And for the first time all night, Mia didn't look like someone who might walk away. Winter gave way to the soft chill of early spring, the kind of days when the snowbanks melted into slush and the sunlight lingered a little longer in the afternoons. Life had settled into its own quiet rhythm. Mia still worked at the bookstore, but now her shifts ended with Ethan waiting outside to walk her home. Or more often, back to his place, where Emma would already be at the kitchen table with homework spread out and an extra plate set for dinner. On a Saturday morning, much like the one when they'd first met, they found themselves back at the diner. Same booth by the window, same smell of coffee and pancakes drifting through the air. But everything felt different now. Mia sat beside Emma, leaning in to admire her latest drawing, the yellow scarf still looped around her neck despite the warming weather. Ethan watched them for a moment, letting the scene sink in. There had been no big declarations, no dramatic turning point, just 100 small moments that had quietly built something solid between them. When the waitress came by, she smiled. "The usual for you three?" 3. The word landed softly but firmly, and Ethan didn't correct her. He glanced at Mia, and she met his eyes with that same look she'd given him at the banquet, steady, sure, like she finally believed she belonged here. Outside, a light snow started to fall again, swirling gently against the glass. Ethan reached across the table, covering Mia's hand with his. "Looks like winter's not done with us yet," he said. Mia's smile was warm, her fingers curling into his. "That's okay," she replied. "I've got good company this time." And for the first time in years, Ethan realised he wasn't just holding his world together, he was building a new one. The takeaway from the story: a single act of kindness can change a life, not just for the one who receives it, but also for the one who gives it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time and support. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you again soon here on Rain Inside.